the human being just a spiritual being, nor are they just a social or just a physical being. We are all of the above. And thus we must focus on all aspects when we want to consider living with wholeness, living with heartfulness. If we understand living from the heart, living with presence, to essentially refer to being in life with your whole being, then living with heartfulness is essentially synonymous to the idea of healing. The word healing in English, it comes from the Anglo-Saxon root, meaning a return to wholeness, a return to a state of being whole. And so what do we understand immediately? That prior to healing, there is a state of fragmentation. There is some type of split, a fracture. Something has come apart, which needs to be put back together. We also know something. We know that healing, if understood as a return to wholeness, is very different than curing someone. And we might think, wait, no, that sounds very similar. Healing, curing is not the same thing. No. If we think about cure, see, a cure is about removing or resolving a disease or a symptom. It's almost like if someone has a disease, get rid of that, now they're cured. Healing really isn't about that. It's not about removing something necessarily. It's about becoming whole again. There are certain aspects of our lives we cannot change. It's just a fact. We experience certain things in life that you can't go back in life and change. Maybe you made certain mistakes. Maybe you experienced certain things. You can't change them. The cure would be to go back and erase that from your experience. Cannot be done. Oftentimes, however, those experiences, whatever it was that we went through, it did something to our sense of self, our perspective. And so healing really is just a matter of bringing it all back together. There's parts of ourselves that we love. The aspect of us that is productive, is efficient, is inquisitive, motivated, ambitious. These parts, we love these parts. We display them to the world. We show people. We talk about them. And then there's parts of us, aspects of our lives that we are embarrassed about. We're ashamed of, that we've even disowned. That's not me. Healing is the process of bringing all of that back together. Yeah. It's to say that, no, I did mess up. Yeah, this did happen. Yeah, I'm not happy about this. But I don't do better by ignoring it. No. I actually move forward in my life by learning to integrate this, giving it meaning, giving it perspective, a sense of processing. And then I can move forward as a whole being. And one of the signs that you're not moving forward as a whole being is you self-sabotage in certain aspects of your life. Repeatedly. You find yourself working against yourself. There's a part that seems to just tear you down over and over again. And that's a sign that you want to do this, you want to accomplish this, you want to get this done. Something is working against you from within. It's something that you've not addressed and come to terms with. So healing is really that return to wholeness, whereby then we can live from our hearts with complete presence. I mentioned how our painful experiences in life, when not met with support and compassion, they fragment us. They fragment our sense of self. When we were growing up, We had a certain idea of who we were, of who our parents were, who our friends were, what kind of world the world is. We had a certain sense of whether or not the world was a place of justice, whether or not people were trustworthy. These were all ideas we had. And if all of them were very positive, maybe along the way, something caused a fracture in our understanding. The first time you discovered that your parents lied to you, because they do. Parents do this. They're human. They're not angels. They make mistakes. They have flaws. The first time you discovered it. The first time a close friend betrayed you. The first time you learned about something evil that happened in the world that you couldn't wrap your head around. How could humans do this to other humans? What is this world? And it's very hard. If you don't have a way to process it, to make sense of it, you can lose hope in people. You can lose trust. You can begin to feel like I must just take care of myself. I can't rely on nobody. And so we then develop almost a level of disconnect from others, from the world, ultimately from God. Sheikh Hamza, Sheikh Hamza Yusuf, he says, humans aren't so disconnected from God as they are disconnected from their hearts. And last week we talked a lot about this idea of being disconnected from ourselves. We live in our heads. We're not really living holistically because we don't feel safe enough. We believe it's naive to do so. We believe that if we live holistically, that people will think of us a certain way. They'll look at us and say, what's wrong with this person? We worry about people's perception. We worry about how people will interpret our behavior. And so we trim ourselves down to what we think is acceptable, or we've been told is acceptable. And again, in that process, we're disconnected from being and living holistically. And so last week I spoke about how our painful experiences can lead to disembodiment. And that segues very and dovetails with today's discussion, which is one of the major obstacles we experience in trying to live lives of presence, of intentionality, of bringing our full beings to bear on life, on existence, is addictions. And I really want to look into this concept of living and struggling with addictions. This is a very important conversation, especially in the time that we live in. And I want to approach it, hopefully, inshallah, from a more compassionate and hopeful perspective. Because I think it's important that we step back and be a little less clinical in our approach to the topic of addictions, inshallah. But I want to step back even further before we delve into the topic. And I want to acknowledge something that the Quran makes very clear. Because when we think about life and why life is the way it is, why the world is the way it is, why we have to go through what we go through in life, a common question is why? Why are things the way they are? The Quran is very clear about this. The Quran frames life in a very specific way as a test. This is clear and evident from the Quran when you go through the various verses. Allah Ta'ala speaks about life. He says, لِيَبْلُوَهُمْ أَيُّهُمْ أَحْسَنُ عَمَلًا. To test them, bala, to put them through tribulation, to see what their answers and responses are to the questions on the exam of life. Allah Ta'ala repeatedly talks about life as a test. This dunya as darul ibtila. It is a place of being tested. This is such a fundamental understanding for Muslims and believers to have. It literally will change how you look at everything in life. And it's not an assumption that's made by non-Muslims at all, which is why it's very fascinating for them to learn when Muslims tell them we view life as a test from God. Because suddenly now you have a framework within which to make sense of what's going on. This is what we always look for. We look for frameworks, lenses that we can use to interpret the world, people's behaviors. So we study personality. What does personality do for us? It gives us a typography, a classification of how to understand this person. Oh, they score high on agreeableness, but not so high on conscientiousness. Ah, I see now. It explains a lot of their behavior. We look for these, ways of making sense of the world. These are heuristics that we use to gain as much information of the world in the quickest amount of time. What is the framework of life? And how do you make sense of life without that framework? Is life just random and chaos? Is it all just unfolding without any divine guidance and intervention? Is this all just complete arbitrary, behavior? The Quran tells us no, this world is a place of test. And so this now starts to shape how we interpret not only people's behavior, but your own responsibilities. You start to use that framework to ask yourself, what would enable me to pass this test? It's not just about me doing whatever I want at this point. It's about me doing that which will help me pass the test. What is the test? What's the right answer? What do I need to study to know the right answers? When I look at what's happening in the world, how does that fit into this whole framework of test? And this is why one person he said, Tawheed, the belief in one God, is not just a theology. It's not just a belief I have. I'm Muslim, so I believe in one God. It's not merely reflective of your belief system. He says it's also a psychology. Tawheed is a way of being in the world, a way of perceiving the universe and interpreting it. It's a lens. It's a worldview. We don't just experience life. We are tasked with processing it. Two people can witness the same thing in front of them happen. And one can walk away utterly perplexed. I don't know what's wrong with people. People are just whack nowadays. Like, no idea how to make sense of that. And another person saw the same thing, but they have a tool to process. So they walk away and they go, yeah, this is an individual who's acting from a place of pain. And while their behavior is completely unjustified and it's completely wrong, ethically, morally, but I can understand where it's coming from. This is not random. This is a person acting from a place of pain. It's a framework. Or this is a person that cannot accept the truth because their ego is getting in the way. The day that you learn part of the Islamic worldview is that every human has an ego, a nafs. That shifts how you understand human behavior. Someone doesn't just do something because they didn't know. They could know very well. But because they have an ego, a nafs, a part of them that rebels against the truth, and they haven't learned to discipline that part of them, you're not so harsh on them. You acknowledge their behavior is wrong, but you understand that this is someone struggling with their nafs. And the one who struggles with their nafs suffers first before everybody else around them. Oh yeah, people around them will suffer, but the first person to suffer in the life of a person struggling with their nafs is themselves. And so The Quran gives us this lens through which to look at the world and at life. And I want to give you an example of this, right? Because it's such an important point when it comes to our religiosity. It's not to view religiosity merely as a set of tasks that you check off and you go home, and now I have a ticket to paradise in my pocket. It's like, no, true religiosity shapes not only how you are, but how you perceive life. You don't look at the same world as the person beside you, because all they see is the horizontal. They only see the material. And the believer is always acknowledging the divine decree and that transcendent, thread that underlies human existence. It's a whole different way of thinking about it. I want to give you an example. When you go to an optometrist and you sit down and they put those lenses in front of you and they say, read what's on the wall. And you try, I can't see anything. So what do? They shift the lens. And you're like, nah, I think that's a H maybe. I'm not sure. Switch the lens. Switch the lens. Until finally the right lens enables you to see what's there. They never brought what was there closer to you. They never changed what was there. You didn't move. The lens shifted. And when the lens shifted, suddenly what made no sense to you is clear, and you can read it letter by letter, line by line. The Quran gives us this framework. Life is a test. And since life is a test, you're going to go through experiences and moments that are going to hurt. They're going to challenge you. And they're going to push you. And your mistake would be to see your pain as your enemy. You have a painful experience. Yeah, this test must be too hard. Why? Because studying is hard. Like, tests are not meant to be easy. A valid test will push you. It'll push the best, and it'll push those who are at the bottom. They will test every person. In life, we begin to see from the Quranic perspective, from that Islamic framework of life as a test, we see pain not as the enemy, but as a messenger. That's reminding us, that pain is reminding us that something isn't right. That we need to step back and reevaluate what's going wrong in my life. In the Greek tragedy Agamemnon, the writer, he has a line in there where he says, we must suffer into truth. Sometimes it is our pain and suffering that is powerful enough to break through the lies and delusion that we're in to finally face truth. And this is something you will witness all over the world, universal. Someone doesn't want to admit they're the problem or that they are responsible for the failures in their life. So they keep blaming people. But it's like every situation they show up in, it falls apart. And eventually, the truth is just glaring them in the face with all that pain inside of how life has not played out how they wanted it to play out. And the truth is staring them in the face saying, you're the problem. And they want to, again, make an excuse, but they know they can't. It's right there. And finally, 10, 15 years later, they say, you know what? You're right. I got to change. They suffered their way till they came to the truth. That is sometimes the only way for people to come face to face with the truth. And so then we become grateful for all the difficult moments we go through in life. We don't ask for it. We ask Allah for afiyah, for well-being, comprehensive well-being. But in moments of difficulty, we recognize there is wisdom in this. So part of the test of life is that we will face many painful and uncomfortable experiences. And so the Quran gives us perspective. It gives it meaning. It shares wisdom as to why we go through difficulties. But despite all of that, you still have to deal with the pain that's right in front of you, don't you? It's nice to come to a halaqah and you learn that, through our pain, our sins are forgiven. Through our pain, our souls are purified. Through our pain, we resonate and relate more to the prophets. We deepen our trust in Allah. These are all beautiful things. But let's be real. When you go home, you still have to face what you face. When you think about your life, you still have to acknowledge whatever happened, happened. Do you not? You cannot just ignore what happened. Spirituality is not the cheat code that gets you to evade any pain in life. No, that's not spirituality. It's not to escape life. True spirituality brings you face to face with life. Otherwise, it's spiritual bypassing. It's using spirituality to avoid responsibility. To not have to face the fact that, what's being asked of me right now is get up and change my son's diapers in the middle of the night. Absolutely. It doesn't feel spiritual, man. I'll rather pray tahajjud. No. Don't worry about your tahajjud. It's time to get up, change diapers. That is your spirituality right now. Yeah. It's to come face to face with life. And so, when, all of that perspective that spirituality offers, we're still facing life. Are we not? Every day. Every day we're facing life. And life can be very painful. And so human beings, in the face of all that pain, look for ways to cope with it. And so we develop coping mechanisms. Now, coping mechanisms serve a purpose. And for many phases and stages of our lives, those coping mechanisms are what get us through that stage. Absolutely. They serve a function. They are not the enemy. They are not a mistake. But when we become overly dependent and over reliant on these coping mechanisms and they're unhealthy, we run the risk of developing addictions. So now I want to ask you guys a question. What would distinguish a healthy, consistent habit from an addiction? Anyone? Yeah. Tell me more. Beautiful, beautiful. You said it causes harm to your life, right? That's definitely one aspect of it. Because a healthy, consistent habit doesn't harm you. Yeah. The ability to quit. Beautiful. Absolutely. That's one key part of what separates the two. Is a healthy, consistent habit, you can quit it. You can give it up. There might be a little bit of withdrawal maybe, but it's not you collapse. It's not everything just falls apart. And that's what happens often with addictions, is you struggle to function when you try to quit. It starts to interfere with your life. A healthy, consistent habit contributes to your life. It's in line with your values and what you're trying to accomplish. An addiction, even if at its core it could be healthy, but when it starts to take you away from what's important, it ceases to hold its healthy status. What do I mean by that? Working out is meant to be a good, healthy, consistent habit. It's good. But it can become an addiction. How? When a person becomes so obsessed with working out that they neglect their duties to go work out. No, I have to. There's a fear if I miss my workout that I'll start to look really overweight. It's almost like an obsession. It's a good habit, but an over-reliance, over-dependence to the point that it starts to harm, that's now an addiction. And so, one definition given is that an addiction is a complex psycho-physiological process that manifests in any behavior in which a person finds pleasure and relief and as a result craves it, but then they suffer negative consequences without being able to give it up. I mean, that's comprehensive. It covers every aspect. An addiction, an addiction, we turn to them usually because we receive some pleasure or some relief. Even healthy habits can often help us find some relief. But when we start to crave it to the point that it starts to interfere with our lives, we're not able to give it up. And then as a result of it interfering with our lives, we can often suffer negative consequences. It's okay to call your mother or your father every day. It's not a bad thing, mashallah. It's beautiful. Hopefully you have a wonderful relationship with your parents. But to start calling them every day during work hours, because you're trying to avoid your responsibility of work, now suddenly a good behavior is becoming a problem. It's being used to avoid dealing with one's responsibilities. The word addiction comes from the Latin root addictus. And in Roman law, an addictus was a person that became enslaved through a court ruling. Essentially, someone was in debt. It was in debt. They didn't have enough money to pay back the debt, an indentured slave. They didn't have the money to pay it back, so what they would have to do is they would have to go and work with no pay. Through their labor, they would pay off their debt. They were essentially enslaved to the person. I will work for you for no pay to pay off my debt. It has a meaning of enslavement. Someone with an addiction is enslaved. Someone who's enslaved doesn't have free will. Now we might think that with an addiction, a person does have free will. But that's literally what I want to talk about today, is with addictions, a person becomes so disconnected from the present moment that it's almost autopilot. The trigger is there, and it sets off a chain reaction of, neurological processes, but essentially behaviors. And before the person knows it, they're engaging in that addictive behavior. And so you're absolutely disconnected from being present and living from your heart in that moment. And you're totally doing something that you're not even fully there. It's almost like you wake up. It's almost like you snap back to reality afterwards with regret, with remorse. Why did I do that? Why did I send that message? Why did I consume that? It's a regret. And so an addiction really is an enslavement to a certain substance or behavior. Addiction can interestingly even be an enslavement to your past. Everything you do in your life is a reaction to something of the past. Everything. Your reaction to what someone says is based on the past. And we're going to talk more about, inshallah, how this shows up. When we speak about addiction, we often focus immediately on how to fix it. The topic of addiction comes up and everyone wants to talk about how do we fix it now? How to get rid of it? We jump straight to what do I do about it? Rather than ask, wait, why is this happening? I wasn't born with this. I wasn't born with this. So why is this happening? And this is reflective of our society. Our society very much jumps to what to do about something. Someone goes to how often have we been prescribed medicine? When really we just needed to fix certain lifestyle factors. But it's not a matter of address the core of the issue in our society. We operate very much from a fix-it lens. So the issue is, okay, what do you have going on? Here, do this. This will reduce the symptoms and the pain will go away. But wait, why did the pain show up in the first place? And that's not a question. And doctors will tell us to go talk to a psychologist, as though there is a mind-body split, as though we are split. We are minds and we are bodies and treated separately. And this is a deficiency in our model. Now, an example, if you have a plant that's in your garden that's withering, the first thing, you don't ask yourself, wait, what fertilizer should I add? That's not the question. The question is, whoa, why is it unhealthy? Is it getting enough sunlight? Is the soil right? Is there something poisoning it in its environment, in the soil? What's going on? And because you could change, you could bring in new soil and fertilizer. You could do that, but if the issue was sunlight to begin with, that's not solving anything. When we want to talk about addictions, it's a very sensitive topic because underlying addictions is always shame. It's always shame. We're going to talk about that. But even to approach addictions, it's not, how do I fix this? But even before that, we have to ask, wait, why are there addictions to begin with? Now, some have theorized that the reason why we don't ask why and we rather ask what to do about it, it's almost like what some would call forward thinking. Let's not go into the past. Let's just fix, for the future. It's because you don't have to admit what went wrong in the past. You don't have to come face to face with mistakes you've made, things that happened to you. You don't have to face all that. So the mentality becomes, let's just try to fix this addiction. But the moment you ask why, you're forced to go back and say, wait, what led to this? And that process can be deeply uncomfortable, but it's necessary. So the question is not why the addiction. It's why the pain that led this individual to turn to this coping mechanism, become overly dependent and overly reliant on it until it became an addiction. The question is not just what's the treatment, it's wait, why is there pain to begin with? And so from this lens, as I've been trying to frame this discussion of addiction, we don't see addiction as simply a choice or a bad habit. It is an attempt, and I really hope you take this home. It's an attempt by the human being to solve a problem that was created by some type of pain in life. Are you guys with me? Y'all get that? An addiction is an attempt to solve a problem that was caused, right, by the pain, the overwhelming experience that we went through in life. And so through this addiction, and by addiction I don't just mean substances. It can be behaviors. It can be mentalities. We can find comfort in adopting a certain perspective that's really not healthy for us. What is the person seeking by turning to this addiction? Whatever it is. They could be seeking relief from pain. Something reminds them of that pain. How do I seek it? So, you see a video. And this is where you need to develop self-awareness, right? Is you see a video. And in the video, there's something that triggers an insecurity of yours. Something that you don't like about yourself. So you have different choices here. One choice is to tear down the person in the video. So you open up the comment section, you say, yeah, you show up, yeah, this. You're not actually that, whatever. Tear them down to make yourself feel better. The other option is to kind of slump into this shame. You start to beat yourself up. See? Look at people here. They're doing so well in life. And look at you. Not even this yet. Haven't even accomplished that yet. Look how far behind you are in life. This person's only 20. And look at them. And you just shame yourself. What does that shame do to you? triggers deep, deep negative emotions, negative feelings. Now, last week I spoke about homeostasis, the idea that when you're experiencing deep negative emotion, we will seek something that gives us a hit of positivity to balance it out. So, what do people turn to? Something, some coping mechanism. And when it's unhealthy, it gives them relief. That you feel good for a moment or for a few hours. You feel better. And then what? When it wears off, when it's over, you're back to facing yourself. And the shame sets in because of the negative consequences, the harm of the behavior. And that shame then does what? Makes you feel terrible again. And there's this loop, this cycle that this individual finds themselves in that they can't seem to escape. Have you noticed this? And so it's a very logical approach. There's something deeply unbearable inside. You know the word trauma. The word trauma literally means, I don't remember if it's Latin or Greek, it means wound. That wound will always bleed if it's not healed. Anytime you touch it, it will bleed, it will hurt, it will pain if it's not healed. And time does not heal all wounds. Time does not heal all wounds. So there's something bearable, some pain inside of me. And it's too painful to face it. It's too painful. As a young child, you don't even know about this. What do you know about the pain that you're experiencing? You're small. You're 10, you're 8, you're 7. What do you know about this? Nothing. But something overwhelming takes place. Why did it take place? It didn't happen to anybody else, to your knowledge, right? No one else went through it. Something must be wrong with me. I'm the problem. That's the most logical explanation, right? And my parents just reinforce that when they tell me, yeah, you shouldn't have done that. Yeah, you were the problem. Yeah, you're not good. So now I look for a fix, something to solve this. Drugs, work. You know, work, we have workaholism, form of addiction. You throw yourself into your work. Why? So you don't have to face the pain of your struggling marriage at home. That's an addiction. The idea that I can't just relax. Vacation? No, I can't do it. Even on vacation, I'm going to take my laptop. I can't do it. It's compulsive. People around me are asking for my attention. No, I can't give them that attention. If I do, I feel like I'm wasting time. I'm looking at my kids and I feel like I'm wasting time. Allahu Akbar. That can happen. Compulsive shopping. This is a real thing now. You know the excitement around, oh, I got the tracking number. Okay, now it's reached this place. It's going to be delivered tomorrow. It's going to make my life better. And I get it. And I feel good for an hour, 2 hours. And then it's gone. Now it's here. Now I'm used to it. And I need to buy something else to give me some type of positivity in my life. TV shows. These are all ways that we try to disconnect from what we're seeing and turn to something that will give us some relief, temporary relief. We know it's temporary because we're not actually addressing the problem. It's like a Band-Aid for something that needs surgery. Yeah. Was in work. A person who works so hard can get to a point where just sitting with their kids can feel like a waste of time. Why? Because I'm not making money. Workaholism pushes people to do this, right? It takes them away from what's actually important. It's compulsive. Even when theoretically they know that my kids need me and I'm responsible for them, but maybe there's too much pain facing their own children. Maybe they let their children down. Maybe they weren't good to their children, so they avoid conversations. So then what do you do instead? Well, to make myself feel productive and good, I'll work. And I'll work and I'll work and I'll work. I mean, I've heard stories of people who don't come home. They just stay out for weeks on end because they don't want to come and deal with their spouse. It's too painful. They're successful out there, so why not live in the land of success, then come home to the home of shame and failure? Now, the fix works briefly, because for at least a little moment, your mind's off the pain. But then either you wasted money, so you feel guilty. You neglected people, you feel guilty. You harmed yourself, you feel guilty. This just deepens shame. And so why do these coping mechanisms develop to begin with? Because we have to cope. We must deal with the pain that we have in our lives somehow. And the very beginning, arguably, the very beginning of these coping mechanisms and the pain is rooted in our unmet needs as a young child. This is important. Every one of us has to accept that there was a period in our lives. It doesn't matter how smart you are today, how accomplished you are, how intelligent you are, how capable you are today. Every 6-year-old and every 7-year-old was not ready to deal with many of the overwhelming experiences that people go through in life. It's just a fact. And anyone who claims otherwise is just feigning ignorance of human nature. So, one of the primary needs of the human being is what? It's safety. It's safety. It is that I can explore the world and understand the world and myself and the people around me. I can learn how to develop relationships with safety. The word for safety in Arabic is aman. And it comes from the same root letters as iman, which is faith or belief in God. And it's fascinating, the relationship. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was brought up by who? His mother, Amina. Amina. Literally, that name comes from the same roots of safety. And the other woman who primarily brought him up was Halima. Her name comes from Hilm, which is patience and forbearance. He was brought up around Aman and Hilm, around safety and forbearance. What does that do for the security of an individual? Now, what does it take to overwhelm a child? What does it take? It takes turning off the lights in the basement and leaving them there. That's all it takes. Today, you voluntarily choose to go downstairs and turn off all the lights so no one can bother you. You can sit by yourself. You voluntarily do it today because you can cope with it. You ever seen small kids that don't want to be in the dark? Right? What does it take to overwhelm a young kid? Not much. A stern look. Watch how that kid shuts down. Doesn't take much. And so when a child repeatedly experiences these things, and it's not just from their parents, right? Because you go out in the world. Recently I was teaching a knowledge session. I asked the kids, I said, how many of y'all, because we're talking about going back to school, I said, how many of y'all get bullied? I want to tell you, majority of the hands went up. I was like, how many of you bully? And like 2 kids put their hands up, right? I was like, someone's doing the bullying here. Like, how is it that everybody's getting bullied but no one's bullying? You don't think bullying has an impact on the self-esteem of a child? And if you go home and tell your mom and your dad, and they don't do anything about it because maybe they don't know what to do about it, you don't think that affects your sense of self when they called you names? I'm just being real here. Like today, someone can say what they want, and maybe it doesn't affect you today. But a 7-year-old who's still trying to figure out who they are, it affects them. And so this child starts to now try to figure out ways to be better in the world. I need to prove to these people that I am who I claim to be and I want to be. What would it take? Do I need to become a bully? To get respect, do I need to start vaping? To get respect, do I need to engage? To show people that I'm dangerous, do I need to do dangerous things? Because maybe that'll give me the respect I'm looking for. To convince myself that no, I'm not ugly like so and so says. But do I need to start displaying myself a certain way, engaging in risky behaviors? I know, we hear about it from 11-year-olds, 12-year-olds, and we get shocked, right? We're like, what's going on? Where did this come from? What are these parents doing? That's what we often think, right? We think it's just a lack of nurturing the child well. We're not understanding that this child is reacting to something to try to meet some need they have. When you start to see it from that lens, you develop compassion. You go, look, man, people are they're trying to meet their basic needs. People need to feel safe. They need to feel a certain degree of respect. They need to feel like they belong. They need to feel like that they're not ugly. And people will go to, great extents to try to get that. Adults do it, let alone children. It's not like us adults are immune. Tell me why the TRT and steroids industry is booming. Tell me, where does that come from? From a desire for health purely? Or is it about an insecurity of your own image? Why are fillers and injections and surgery, why is that more prevalent than ever before? Why is that? It's in a sense of dissatisfaction with one's own image. It's a pain. It's a pain point. And I will go and do things that I know in the long run will harm me. But I'll go do it if it can temporarily fix my need today. At the root of so many of our behaviors lies a need. And when we can understand what that need is, we can begin to try to even start to address the addiction. A mistake we make today, though, is we've accepted so much of what we're seeing around us to be normal. So you have people like Gabor Mate who talk about the myth of normal. The idea that, the chronic stress that people have, the loneliness that we experience, the hyper-competitiveness, that all these things are just healthy, natural. This is just how things are. And because it's so widespread and prevalent, it's normal. Something being widespread and prevalent doesn't make it normal. Something persisting for a long time doesn't make it okay and normal. A genocide going for 2 years doesn't make it okay. We know that. We know that. We understand that. But yet, it seems we think it's normal at this point. And so, we have to step back for a moment and say, look, I think I've mentioned this before. Isn't it rare to come across someone? Like, it's not common. Would you agree? Show of hands. Would you agree that it's not so common to come across someone that legitimately, when you investigate, get to know them, and you're like, wow, this person has it together? How many of you would say that's true? Like, it's not common. Most people you meet, you're going to find that they're struggling with something pretty serious at some level. No? I got really few hands. Okay, I guess I overestimate, or maybe I just see a lot of problems every day. SubhanAllah. Yeah. Yeah. Now, the reason I highlighted this point is not to say everybody here is fake. Like, that's not what I'm trying to say, guys. What I'm trying to say is, if you have a culture and everything in the culture is dying or suffering, at some point you have to step back and go, there's something in the culture Do you get that? The idea of a culture in which organisms grow. If only one organism is suffering, you might say, well, what's going on with that organism? Let's look into it. If the majority in the culture are suffering, at some point we have to say there's something in the culture. It's literally called a toxic culture when all the organisms within it die, or at least weaken greatly. And if we look at our society, subhanAllah, some of the most fundamental needs of the human being are neglected. This brings us back to the topic of community. Our need for community, for connection to people around us, is extremely powerful. You might say like, okay, what's that going to do with anything? Okay, fine, I make some more friends. Okay, big deal. No. Let me explain. Before you underestimate the importance of community and connection. One of the most powerful methods of healing is when you come face to face with a compassionate, empathic witness to your pain. When you, with all your shame about what's happened to you in life, you think what? I can never tell anybody about this. Why not? Tell me. If someone feels that, why can't they tell anybody? What's the reason? What's the fear? Okay, people have shamed them. What will happen if I share this? Because we usually talk to people to try to what? Connect with them. If I share this part of me, I'm worried that what's going to happen? They're going to reject me and turn away from me. Beautiful. Yeah. They'll judge me. Absolutely. So what do? We keep it to ourselves, believing this to make us unacceptable. We feel like we belong 60%. Because I've only shown the world 60%. 40% of me has never seen the light of day out in public. And we hide that with everything we have. But subhanAllah, the day you can find somebody, and it's not everybody, should not be everybody. Not everyone has the capacity to bear this. But subhanAllah, and anyone who's worked in a healing profession, in the capacity, they know that just someone being able to get the words out, Allahu Akbar, the courage it takes to just verbalize, this is what happened. One of the most common things they'll say, I've never told anybody. I've never told anyone, they'll say. But for somehow in that moment, they're able to verbalize, they bring it out. And it's almost like a weight comes off their shoulders. Finally, for the first time in my life, I am 100% seen. I'm not walking around constantly hiding something. And this person in front of me did not reject me. Which leads me to believe that maybe I'm acceptable. Our relationships are a mirror for our own well-being, especially as young children, but even when we get older. That's why humans need validation. We develop a sense of self by what people tell us. That's why it's so important for young children to be surrounded by healthy and positive messaging, so that their sense of self is developed what? In light of healthy standards. In light of healthy standards. So you don't have someone 9 years old saying, I'm going on a diet. 9-year-old. Allahu Akbar. Why do they feel the need to? At 9 years old. And by diet, they don't mean like, yeah, I get my healthy macros and stuff. That's not what they mean. They mean just like cut the amount of calories I eat so I can be thin. Where does that come from? They're not born with that. That is the messaging that they're surrounded by. And that's how they develop their sense of self. And so, our relationships are a mirror. The Prophet ﷺ told us, Al-mu'minu mir'atul mu'min. A believer is a mirror to another believer. Imagine you looked in the mirror and the mirror just responded to you, you ugly as hell. What would you do? You're like, if the mirror is saying that, forget someone else. Right? Someone else might have a distorted idea and image of who I am. The mirror, in our opinion, is meant to be the most accurate depiction of who I am. It literally shows me who I am. And I look in the mirror and that's what I hear. This is what I'm told. What does that do for me? Yeah, absolutely beautiful. Yeah, you mentioned that people, because they can't tolerate their own discomfort when listening to someone else's, overwhelming experiences, what they do is before they even are able to mirror back, they shut down, and the other person doesn't have an opportunity to see anything and learn anything from that. Um, and what does the person take away when they're trying to share and they're being shut down? Specifically in the context of young children trying to share with their parents. What do they take away from that? If not valid or not appreciated, or it's too much. It's too much. And the individual grows up feeling like they're a burden. They feel like they're a burden. I can't I can't tell anyone my problems because that just will be burdensome for that person. And so yeah, beautiful. Absolutely. Yeah, not to demonize the parents. The parents are often, like you said, stressed. They haven't learned to manage their stress. If someone were to ask me what is the greatest skill you can learn to try to do well in your life as a young adult, my answer would be you'd be learn to manage your stress. That's my answer. Learn to manage your stress. It just reminded me when you said that. Because the way stress wreaks havoc on people's well being, on their spirituality, on everything is incredible. What stress does to a person's testosterone levels, like forget all the other supplements, stress levels, learning to manage your stress. And spirituality is so powerful for giving perspective and helping with managing one's stress. I know I was talking to someone recently, and they're talking, and they had accepted Islam a few years ago. And they mentioned that prior to accepting Islam, things would overwhelm them because when something would happen, they'd be like, why? Why is this happening? And they didn't know how to make sense. And it would make them very angry, and they would walk around angry. And they said, after accepting Islam, I have a framework, I have a way to understand life. And even if I don't understand it, I know all of this is taking place under the watchful gaze of a merciful Lord. And I rest knowing that we're in good hands. And they say, I genuinely don't feel that same anger or stress at all. What Iman does. And so, to kind of wrap things up here, addictions disconnect us from reality and from presence in life because we have underlying pain that we don't address. And so then when that pain is triggered by a conversation which reminds you of how you haven't accomplished this in life, or seeing something that makes you feel like, oh, I'm not up to standard. The amount of things that will trigger your insecurities that have not been addressed, then we turn to something to ease the pain. We could watch TV, we could watch the news, we could throw ourselves into work, into substances, into behaviors. Um, but in doing so, we're disconnected from where we need to be, which is right where we are, surrounded by the people that often we love, but we're not able to show them love. We love them, but we're trying to deal with our pain. We don't have time. We haven't even learned to reconnect with reality and show them that love so they can show us love. And so this is a major obstacle in our society. The goal for me today has been to try to highlight addictions are merely the symptom. We often think of it as the problem, but it's a symptom of an underlying pain that we're trying to address, some relief that we're seeking. Um, there's a few other things that we seek, some anxiety that we're trying to escape from, some sense of control that we're trying to regain, or just some moment of fleeting pleasure or ease that we're seeking. Um, but there's a way out. This is very important for us to understand. Because if you just try to change the behavior, this is what's the most common approach. Okay, I'm just going to stop, right? I'm just going to stop. Willpower. And while you do need some willpower, it's not usually sufficient because the pain hasn't been addressed. And if that pain is not addressed, and if a person does not reintegrate and heal, return to wholeness, the pain will continue to pulse negativity to the person because it's demanding to be addressed. It's demanding to be faced. May Allah Ta'ala grant us the courage. It takes immense courage. May He grant us the courage to face those pain points in our lives. May He grant us the ability to understand that it is not through shame that we can heal our own addiction, but rather through an understanding of the underlying pain. May He open our eyes to the suffering of the world around us. May He grant us the spirit and the passion to be a part of the solution, to be people who engage in healing so that they don't continue to pass on their pain to the next generation. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen wa sallallahu wa sallam wa barak ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. I have some good news. I have one more session where I want to talk about an obstacle. After that, I'm past obstacles, okay, inshallah? And we will move to talking about heartfulness itself and then methods of developing heartfulness, inshallah. All right, guys, so bear with me one more week as we gather collectively to remind ourselves of our own pain. But inshallah, it'll get better, inshallah. All right, guys? Jazakallah khair. We'll see you next week. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.